What happens when a simple misunderstanding reveals society's deepest biases? When 18-year-old Marcus Johnson enters Luxury Motors for a school project, he never expects to be humiliated and thrown out by the arrogant dealership manager. But what Victoria Harrington doesn't realize is that appearances can be deceiving, and her snap judgment is about to change everything. Will an unexpected visitor the next day teach her the lesson of a lifetime? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson hurried across the university quad, his backpack heavy with textbooks. At 18, he carried himself with quiet confidence that belied his age. The prestigious Westfield University campus sprawled around him, autumn leaves crunching beneath his sneakers as he made his way to his advanced engineering design class. "Marcus! Wait up," called a familiar voice. He turned to see Aisha Williams jogging toward him, her braids bouncing with each step. As his best friend since orientation week, she was one of the few people who knew the truth about his background. "You ready for Professor Whitman's presentation today?" she asked, falling into step beside him. Marcus nodded. "Been preparing all week. This automotive design project could open some serious doors." What his classmates didn't know, what Marcus deliberately kept hidden, was that he didn't need doors opened for him. As the son of tech billionaire William Johnson, those doors would swing wide automatically if he ever dropped his father's name. But that wasn't Marcus's way. Still planning to check out that luxury dealership after class? Aisha asked, lowering her voice. "Yeah. Luxury Motors has the exact models I need to study for the project. High-end engineering at its finest." Aisha gave him a knowing look. "And you're going as regular Marcus, not as the Johnson heir, right?" He shrugged. "Just a scholarship kid doing research." That was the thing about Marcus. Despite having access to unimaginable wealth, he had insisted on applying to college like everyone else. He'd earned his full academic scholarship through merit alone, his father's money untouched. William had respected his son's wishes, proud of Marcus's determination to make his own way. In class, Professor Whitman announced the semester project, redesigning luxury vehicle components for improved efficiency without sacrificing aesthetics. "You'll need to study existing models up close," Whitman explained. "I've arranged permissions with several dealerships around the city." Marcus made notes in his worn notebook. His passion for engineering wasn't an act, it was genuine. From the time he could walk, he'd been taking things apart, figuring out how they worked, putting them back together. After class, Aisha walked him to the bus stop. "You sure you don't want to at least take your dad's car to the dealership?" she teased. "Might help with the first impression." Marcus laughed. "That defeats the whole purpose, Aisha. I want them to see my work, not my wallet." She squeezed his shoulder. "Text me how it goes. And if anyone gives you trouble." "I can handle myself," he assured her. "It's just a car dealership. What's the worst that could happen?" As the bus pulled away, Marcus reviewed his project notes. His design innovations could revolutionize fuel efficiency in luxury vehicles. All he needed was to examine the current models up close, take some measurements, maybe ask a few technical questions. Simple enough for a scholarship student with a passion for engineering. What could possibly go wrong? The Luxury Motors dealership gleamed in the afternoon sun, a modernist structure of glass and chrome showcasing vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. Marcus stepped off the bus and straightened his university sweatshirt, suddenly aware of how casual he looked compared to the suits milling about the showroom visible through the windows. Inside, the air smelled of leather and money. Marcus paused at the entrance, taking in the polished floors reflecting spotlights that highlighted each vehicle as if it were a sculpture in a museum. Several sales associates glanced his way but quickly returned to their customers or desks when they assessed his appearance. Marcus wasn't oblivious to their dismissal. He'd experienced it before, people judging him by his modest clothes, his youth, the color of his skin. He squared his shoulders and approached a sleek silver sports car, notebook in hand. "Can I help you?" A man in his 30s with a forced smile appeared beside him. His name tag read, Derek Wilson, Sales Associate. I'm a Westfield University engineering student, Marcus explained, offering his student ID. I'm working on a design project and need to study some of your models. Derek's smile tightened. Do you have an appointment? These vehicles aren't for casual browsing. Professor Whitman should have called ahead. I'm on the approved list. Derek's eyes narrowed slightly. Wait here, he said before walking away. Marcus continued his examination, jotting down notes about the aerodynamic features. He carefully opened the driver's door to study the interior architecture, making sure not to touch anything unnecessarily. Across the showroom, Victoria Harrington watched the young black man through narrowed eyes. As the dealership manager, she prided herself on identifying serious buyers from time wasters. This boy in a university sweatshirt definitely fell into the latter category. What's he doing? She asked Derek as he approached her desk. Claims he's a student from Westfield. Something about a project, Derek replied with a dismissive wave. I'm checking if there's actually a list. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her desk. Westfield has plenty of wealthy students. He doesn't look like one of them. She rose from her chair, designer heels clicking against the marble floor as she made her way toward Marcus. By now, he had taken out a small measuring tape and was noting the dimensions of the dashboard. Excuse me, Victoria's voice cut through the showroom's ambient music. What exactly do you think you're doing? Marcus looked up, his expression open and earnest. Taking measurements for my engineering project. I'm studying luxury vehicle design elements and how they. Did anyone give you permission to touch the merchandise? Victoria interrupted, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby customers. I'm being careful, Marcus assured her, showing his notebook. I have permission from Derek, Victoria called over her shoulder without breaking eye contact with Marcus. Did you find this young man on any approved list? Derek returned, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. No record of any university arrangement today. Victoria crossed her arms. I thought as much. Marcus frowned, reaching for his phone. There must be some misunderstanding. I can call my professor right now to clear this up. But Victoria had already made her judgment. That won't be necessary, Victoria stated coldly, gesturing for Marcus to step away from the vehicle. Whatever story you've concocted, I've heard better ones from people far more convincing than you. Marcus blinked, momentarily stunned by the accusation in her tone. It's not a story. I'm a Westfield engineering student working on. Westfield students come from money, Derek interjected, looking Marcus up and down with undisguised contempt. And they don't usually arrive by bus. Marcus felt heat rising to his face but kept his voice level. Not all of us. I'm on a scholarship. Victoria laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. A scholarship to Westfield? How inspiring. Her tone made it clear she didn't find it inspiring at all. But that still doesn't explain why you're measuring our vehicles without authorization. By now, several customers had paused their conversations to watch the unfolding scene. Marcus became acutely aware of being the center of attention, and not in a good way. Look, I can show you my student ID and project brief, Marcus offered, reaching for his backpack. Professor Whitman specifically suggested this dealership because we have vehicles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars that aren't toys for students to play with, Victoria cut in. Her voice grew louder, clearly meant for the audience they'd attracted. This is a place of business, not a classroom. Our customers expect a certain environment. The implication hung in the air. Marcus didn't belong in this environment. From across the showroom, a Hispanic man in a sales associate uniform approached. His name tag identified him as James Rodriguez. Ms. Harrington, James said quietly, I believe I received an email about university students. There was a list. Not now, James, Victoria snapped without looking at him. Her focus remained laser-sharp on Marcus. I'm handling this situation. Derek took a step closer to Marcus, invading his personal space. What were you really hoping to accomplish here? Get inside information for some knockoff brand? Or just killing time pretending you could afford something like this someday? The racial undertones weren't subtle. Marcus clenched his jaw but maintained his composure, something his father had taught him from an early age. As a black man in America, wealthy or not, he would always be judged more harshly, held to different standards. "I'm not pretending anything," Marcus replied evenly. "I'm studying engineering, and luxury vehicles represent the cutting edge of design and innovation. That's all." Victoria's perfectly lined lips curled into a smirk. "Well, today's lesson is over. Derek, please escort our young scholar to the exit." "This isn't right," Marcus protested, his voice firm but not raised. "You haven't even checked properly for the university arrangement." James tried again. "Ms. Harrington, if I could just look through my emails." "I said not now." Victoria hissed before turning back to Marcus with a practiced customer service smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let me be perfectly clear. You are not a customer. You cannot afford anything in this showroom. You are wasting our time and making our actual customers uncomfortable." Derek placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Time to go, kid." Marcus shrugged off the hand. "Don't touch me. I'll leave on my own." Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Security," she called out, her voice echoing through the showroom. A broad-shouldered man in a suit appeared almost immediately. "This young man was touching the vehicles without authorization," Victoria stated loudly. "He needs to be escorted from the premises." The security guard looked uncertainly between Victoria and Marcus, who stood dignified despite the humiliation being heaped upon him. "I can find my own way out," Marcus said quietly, packing his notebook away. He turned to Victoria. "You've made a mistake today. Not just about me, but about what kind of person you are." As the security guard led him toward the exit, Marcus heard Derek murmur to Victoria, "These people always think they're entitled to special treatment." Outside, Marcus stood on the sidewalk, the sun suddenly feeling too bright, too exposing. His hands trembled slightly as he pulled out his phone. He had never used his father's name or wealth as a weapon before. He had principles about making his own way. But some injustices demanded a response. Marcus stepped away from the dealership, his heart pounding despite his outwardly calm demeanor. Once he was around the corner and out of sight, he leaned against a brick wall, taking deep breaths to steady himself. The humiliation burned worse than anger. Years of his father's coaching on handling discrimination washed through his mind. Keep your dignity. Don't let them see they've hurt you. Remember who you are. He pulled out his phone and dialed Aisha. "Hey. How'd it go?" Her cheerful voice rang through the speaker. "Not good," Marcus replied, his voice tight. "They kicked me out." "What? Why?" "Take a wild guess." The bitterness he'd been suppressing crept into his tone. "Apparently, scholarship students who arrive by bus don't belong in their precious showroom." "Oh, Marcus." Aisha's voice softened. "I'm so sorry. That's totally messed up. The manager, this woman Victoria, she made this whole scene. Made sure everyone watching knew I didn't belong there." Marcus closed his eyes, the memory still fresh. "She called security on me, Aisha. Like I was some kind of threat. That's discrimination. You should report them." Marcus sighed. "You know what's crazy? This isn't even the first time something like this has happened. Just the most public." A memory surfaced, Marcus at 12, shopping with his father at a high-end mall. William had stepped away to take a call, and a security guard had immediately approached Marcus, questioning why he was wandering around the luxury store unattended. "What are you going to do?" Aisha asked, pulling him back to the present. Marcus hesitated. "I don't know yet." Since starting college, he'd been adamant about making his own way without his father's influence. William had respected his wishes, proud of his son's independence. Marcus had never used his family name to get special treatment or to punish those who underestimated him. But this felt different. "Are you going to tell your dad?" Aisha's question voiced his exact thoughts. I wasn't planning to, Marcus admitted. You know how hard I've worked to stand on my own. Marcus, Aisha said firmly, this isn't about you getting special treatment. This is about blatant discrimination. Your dad would want to know. He knew she was right. William Johnson had built his tech empire from nothing, overcoming countless barriers along the way. He'd always taught Marcus that with privilege comes responsibility, not just to succeed personally, but to challenge injustice when you encounter it. Yeah, Marcus finally said. I'll call him. After ending the call with Aisha, Marcus stared at his phone for a long moment before dialing his father's number. William answered on the second ring. Marcus? Everything okay? Hey, Dad. Marcus tried to keep his voice casual, but William knew his son too well. What happened? The concern in his father's voice was immediate. Marcus gave him the unvarnished truth, the dismissive treatment, Victoria's public humiliation, the barely veiled racism. As he spoke, Marcus could practically feel his father's controlled anger building through the phone. William Johnson rarely lost his temper, but injustice toward his son was one thing that could bring him close. I'm sorry you experienced that, son, William said when Marcus finished, his voice deceptively calm. Are you okay? I'm fine, Marcus replied automatically, then corrected himself. Actually, no. I'm angry. And embarrassed. And I hate that I even have to call you about this. You never have to apologize for telling me the truth, William said firmly. Where are you now? Heading back to campus. Come to the house instead, William said. We need to discuss this in person. Marcus hesitated. Dad, I don't want you to make a huge deal out of this. Too late, William replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. Some things can't be ignored, Marcus. This is one of them. William Johnson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his home office, looking out over the city as he waited for Marcus to arrive. At 45, he carried the quiet confidence of a man who had built something substantial from nothing. Unlike many of his wealthy peers, William eschewed flashy displays of his billionaire status. His home, while spacious and beautifully designed, wasn't a mansion featured in architectural magazines. His clothes were well-made but understated. His most extravagant possession was perhaps his Rolls-Royce Phantom, a car he drove himself rather than being chauffeured in. The door opened, and Marcus entered. William immediately crossed the room and embraced his son. I'm glad you called me, he said, stepping back to look Marcus in the eyes. I almost didn't, Marcus admitted, dropping his backpack on a nearby chair. You know I don't like running to you with problems. William nodded thoughtfully. Independence is important. But so is recognizing when a situation is bigger than just you. They moved to sit in the comfortable leather chairs near the window. Tell me about this dealership, William said. Luxury Motors, correct? Yes, it's part of the Harrington Auto Group. Marcus leaned forward. Dad, before you say anything, I don't want special treatment because I'm William Johnson's son. That's exactly what I've been trying to avoid. William's expression softened. I know, and I respect that. But this isn't about special treatment, Marcus. This is about basic human dignity. He stood and paced the room, his controlled energy filling the space. When I started out, before the money, before the success, I faced what you face today. Men in suits looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. William's voice remained measured, but his eyes flashed with old pain. The difference is, you shouldn't have to endure that. Not in 2025. Not after everything we've supposedly learned as a society. Marcus watched his father, the tech visionary, the philanthropist, the man who had revolutionized renewable energy storage and made billions in the process. What are you thinking, Dad? William stopped pacing and faced his son. I'm thinking it's time for a lesson. Not just for this Victoria person, but for that entire organization. What kind of lesson? Marcus asked cautiously. William smiled, not the warm smile he shared with family, but the sharp, strategic smile that had made business rivals nervous for 2 decades. The kind that makes a lasting impression. He sat back down across from Marcus. But we'll do it your way. With dignity. With class. And most importantly, with purpose beyond just revenge. Tell me exactly what happened, William said, his voice calm but intent. Don't leave anything out. Marcus recounted the entire experience in detail, from the moment he entered the dealership to Victoria's public humiliation and his forced exit. As he spoke, William listened intently, occasionally jotting notes in a small leather-bound notebook. This Victoria Harrington, William said when Marcus finished. She's the manager. Yes. Blonde, probably late 30s. She seemed to enjoy the whole thing. Marcus's jaw tightened at the memory. And there was this sales guy, Derek, who backed her up. But there was another salesman who tried to help, James Rodriguez. He mentioned something about an email list for university students. William nodded, making another note. So there actually was an arrangement with your university? Professor Whitman said he'd contacted several dealerships. This was on the approved list. William put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. So not only was the treatment discriminatory, but they were actually wrong about the fundamental facts. Seems that way, Marcus agreed. But Dad, what are you planning? I don't want this to become some big deal where you use your influence to crush them. William studied his son with pride. Even after being mistreated, Marcus's concern was for proportionality and fairness. I won't lie to you, son. My first instinct is to buy that entire dealership just to fire this Victoria person. William's expression softened. But that wouldn't solve the real problem, would it? Marcus shook his head. It would just be revenge. Exactly. William stood and walked to the window again. The question is, what outcome would actually make a difference? Not just for you, but for the next young black man who walks into that dealership. They fell silent for a moment, both considering the question. I think, Marcus said slowly, they need to understand what they did wrong. Really understand it. Not just face punishment, but learn from it. William turned, a smile spreading across his face. That's my son, always the teacher. I get it from you, Marcus replied. Remember when that reporter misrepresented your renewable energy project? You didn't sue him. You invited him to tour the facility and see the truth for himself. And he wrote a retraction that was more powerful than any lawsuit could have achieved, William recalled. So we need something similar here. William returned to his seat and leaned forward intently. Here's what I'm thinking. Tomorrow, I visit the dealership. In the Rolls, Marcus interjected with a knowing smile. William grinned. Naturally. I visit, allow them to give me their best VIP treatment, and then reveal who my son is. And then what? Then, William continued, we create a teaching moment. Not just for Victoria and her staff, but for the ownership. I know Richard Harrington, actually. Not well, but we've been at some of the same business functions. He's not a bad person, just out of touch. Marcus suggested. Very. The perfect audience for a lesson in unconscious bias and its real-world impact. Marcus considered the plan. So you're not going to try to get Victoria fired? That's not for me to decide, William replied. But I will make sure Richard understands exactly what happened in his dealership. What happens next should be his decision, if he makes the right one. And if he doesn't? William's expression turned serious. Then we consider more direct approaches. My company buys dozens of vehicles every year for executives. That's business the Harrington Group would hate to lose. Marcus nodded slowly, processing the plan. I want to be there, he said finally. Not for the initial part, you should let them dig their own hole first. But afterward. If this is going to be a teaching moment, I should be part of it. William studied his son with renewed appreciation. At 18, Marcus already understood something many adults never grasped. True change required more than punishment, it required understanding. Agreed, William said. We'll schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. I'll arrive first, let them perform their VIP routine, then call you in. Marcus extended his hand. Deal. As they shook on it, William added, just one thing, son. When you arrive tomorrow, wear your best suit. Making a statement? Marcus asked with a raised eyebrow. Always, William replied with a smile. Always. The following afternoon, William Johnson arrived at Luxury Motors in his Rolls-Royce Phantom. The sleek black vehicle glided to a stop directly in front of the dealership's main entrance, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight like a dark mirror. William adjusted his custom Italian suit before stepping out of the car. The effect was immediate. Through the glass facade, he could see heads turning and bodies straightening. The doorman rushed forward to greet him. Welcome to Luxury Motors, sir, the young man said with a practiced smile. May I assist you with anything today? William returned the smile, his manner relaxed but commanding. Just browsing for now, thank you. Inside, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly as he entered. Sales associates straightened their ties and smoothed their jackets, eyes calculating the value of his watch, suit, and the Rolls-Royce key fob visible in his hand. Victoria Harrington spotted him immediately. Her radar for wealth was well honed after years in luxury sales. She smoothly disengaged from a conversation with a middle-aged couple and made her way toward William. Good afternoon, she greeted him warmly, extending her manicured hand. I'm Victoria Harrington, General Manager. Welcome to Luxury Motors. William shook her hand firmly. William Johnson. Pleasure to meet you. He watched recognition flicker in her eyes, not of his face, but of his name. She didn't quite place him as the tech billionaire, but the name itself carried weight. Mr. Johnson, it would be my personal honor to show you our collection today. Is there a particular model that interests you? William gestured casually around the showroom. I'm considering adding to my fleet. Perhaps 5 or 6 vehicles for company executives. Victoria's smile widened, dollar signs practically visible in her eyes. A fleet purchase. How wonderful. We have several models that would be perfect for executive transport. Let me show you our newest arrivals. As she guided him through the showroom, William noted how other customers were subtly deprioritized. Associates who had been helping them suddenly found reasons to step away, gravitating toward Victoria and her VIP prospect. Derek Wilson hovered nearby, clearly hoping to be included in the potential commission. Victoria eventually beckoned him over. Derek, please bring Mr. Johnson our executive portfolio and some refreshment. The Cristal, I think. Right away, Derek replied eagerly. William observed the performance with detached amusement. The same showroom that had ejected his son less than 24 hours ago was now rolling out the red carpet. As Victoria led him to a private consultation room in the back, William spotted James Rodriguez helping an elderly couple. Their eyes met briefly, and William gave him a slight nod. In the luxurious office, Victoria presented him with a leather-bound portfolio of their high-end vehicles. These would be perfect for your executives, Mr. Johnson. Each can be customized to your specifications. William browsed the catalog unhurriedly. Impressive collection. I'm particularly interested in your customer service philosophy, Ms. Harrington. How do you ensure everyone receives the attention they deserve? Victoria straightened proudly. At Luxury Motors, we pride ourselves on recognizing the needs of our clientele. Not everyone who walks through those doors is a serious buyer, of course, but we have systems in place to identify those who are. Fascinating, William replied, his tone neutral. And what are those systems based on? Experience, mostly, Victoria said with a practiced laugh. After years in this business, you develop an eye for quality. William nodded thoughtfully. I see. And have your systems ever failed you? Misjudged someone, perhaps? A flicker of uncertainty crossed Victoria's face before her professional mask returned. Rarely, Mr. Johnson. Very rarely. William smiled and pulled out his phone. I'd like to include my son in this discussion, if you don't mind. He has an excellent eye for automotive design. In fact, he was here just yesterday. Victoria's smile remained fixed as William dialed. He'll be joining us shortly, William said, setting his phone down. He's quite excited about this potential purchase. Victoria nodded enthusiastically. We'd be delighted to meet your son, Mr. Johnson. Family businesses are our specialty. Oh, it's not exactly a family business yet, William replied with an enigmatic smile. Though Marcus does have some innovative ideas about automotive engineering. He's studying it at Westfield University. Victoria's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. Westfield? What a prestigious institution. Yes, he earned a full scholarship there, William continued, watching her closely. Though I offered to pay his way, he insisted on making it on his own merit. He's very independent that way. A shadow of unease crossed Victoria's face. How admirable. Derek entered with a tray carrying champagne and crystal flutes. Your refreshment, Mr. Johnson. Thank you, Derek, Victoria said quickly. Mr. Johnson was just telling me about his son who attends Westfield. Derek's expression remained professional, though William noticed a slight tension in his shoulders. Actually, William said conversationally as Derek poured the champagne, my son Marcus mentioned he met someone named Derek here yesterday. Would that have been you? The bottle tilted dangerously in Derek's hand. I meet many people every day, sir. The name doesn't ring a bell immediately. Young black man, about 18. He was gathering information for an engineering project. The color drained from Derek's face as realization dawned. Victoria's perfect composure cracked, her eyes widening in horror. Mr. Johnson, she began, her voice strained, there seems to be some confusion. The office door opened, and Marcus stepped in wearing an impeccably tailored suit that matched his father's in quality. The transformation from yesterday's casual student to today's polished young executive was striking. Sorry I'm late, Dad, Marcus said smoothly, then turned to Victoria and Derek with a calm nod. Ms. Harrington. Mr. Wilson. We meet again. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face had gone completely white, while Derek looked like he might be sick. William stood and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. Victoria, Derek, allow me to properly introduce my son, Marcus Johnson. As I mentioned, he's studying engineering at Westfield on a full academic scholarship. His professor arranged for students to visit your dealership yesterday for research purposes. Victoria's mouth opened and closed without sound. Derek had backed himself against the wall, champagne forgotten. There appears to have been some misunderstanding yesterday, William continued, his voice pleasant but with steel underneath. My son was forcibly removed from your establishment when he was here on legitimate academic business. Can either of you explain why that happened? Victoria finally found her voice, though it trembled. Mr. Johnson, there was no record of any university arrangement. We had no way of knowing. There was an email, Marcus interjected calmly. Your colleague James Rodriguez mentioned it. And even if there hadn't been, William added, does that justify calling security on a student who was causing no disruption? I was just following protocol, Victoria stammered. We have valuable merchandise. Is your protocol to publicly humiliate young black men who don't appear wealthy enough for your tastes? William's voice remained level, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The door opened again, and James Rodriguez appeared. Ms. Harrington, I found the university email. It was in the system all along, approved 3 weeks ago by Mr. Harrington himself. Victoria's face crumpled. Mr. Johnson, please understand, this was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Had I known who your son was, that's precisely the problem, William interrupted, his tone sharpening. You shouldn't need to know who someone's father is to treat them with basic dignity and respect. My son doesn't trade on my name, and he shouldn't have to. Derek attempted to salvage the situation. Sir, please accept our deepest apologies. We would be honored to assist your son with his project anytime. And what about the next young person who walks in here without a billionaire father? Marcus asked quietly. Do they deserve less respect? The awkward silence was broken by the sound of the office door opening once more. A distinguished-looking man in his 60s entered, his expression grave. "William Johnson," he said, extending his hand. "Richard Harrington. I was told you were here." William shook the offered hand firmly. "Richard. It's been a while." "Indeed. The Renewable Energy Summit in Geneva, if I recall." Richard's gaze moved to Marcus. "And this must be your son. I've heard remarkable things about your academic achievements, young man." Marcus shook his hand. "Thank you, sir." Richard turned to Victoria, whose complexion had gone from white to gray. "Victoria, I just received a very disturbing phone call from Professor Whitman at Westfield. Something about one of his students being removed from our dealership yesterday despite an approved arrangement." Victoria's perfectly maintained facade finally crumbled completely. "Daddy, I can explain, Daddy." William raised an eyebrow. Richard sighed heavily. "Victoria is my daughter, yes. She's been managing this location for 3 years." He looked directly at Marcus. "Was it you who was asked to leave, son?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, sir. I came to study some of your models for my engineering project. Professor Whitman had arranged it in advance." Richard's expression darkened as he turned to his daughter. "Is this true, Victoria?" "I didn't know about any arrangement," she protested weakly. "And he was touching the vehicles, taking measurements, as specified in the email from Westfield," James interjected, handing Richard a printout. "The students were explicitly authorized to take non-invasive measurements as part of their project." Richard scanned the document, his frown deepening. "This was approved weeks ago. It's in our system." He looked up at Victoria and Derek. "This is inexcusable." "Richard," William said, his tone measured, "I didn't come here today for anyone's termination. I came because what happened to my son reflects a deeper problem, one that affects more people than just Marcus." Richard nodded grimly. "I understand. And I assure you, there will be consequences. What I'm interested in," William continued, "is how you plan to address the culture that allowed this to happen in the first place." Victoria stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Derek had backed himself into a corner, seemingly trying to become invisible. Richard squared his shoulders. "First, Mr. Johnson, Marcus, please accept my sincere apologies for the treatment you received. It was unprofessional, discriminatory, and entirely counter to the values I've tried to instill in this company." He turned to Victoria. "Victoria, you're suspended effective immediately, pending a full review. Derek, the same applies to you." "Daddy!" Victoria gasped. Richard silenced her with a look. "You'll both be required to complete comprehensive sensitivity and anti-bias training before any consideration of reinstatement. James," he continued, turning to Rodriguez, "thank you for attempting to do the right thing yesterday. I'd like you to temporarily assume management responsibilities." James nodded, clearly surprised. "Yes, sir." Richard turned back to William and Marcus. "This isn't just about punishment. It's about changing a culture. I'd welcome any suggestions you might have on how we can do better." William exchanged a glance with Marcus, who stepped forward. "Mr. Harrington, I study engineering because I believe in creating systems that work efficiently and fairly for everyone. Your dealership system failed yesterday, not just for me, but for your business and your values." Richard listened intently as Marcus continued. "I'd suggest starting with the assumptions built into your staff training. Who gets approached immediately? Who gets watched with suspicion? These aren't just moral questions, they're business questions. How many potential customers have walked away because of how they were treated?" Richard nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right." He turned to William. "You've raised an exceptional young man." "He did most of the work himself," William replied with pride. "I just provided occasional guidance." As Victoria and Derek were escorted out by security, a poetic reversal of Marcus's experience, Richard turned back to the Johnsons. "I'd like to make this right. Not just with words, but with actions. 3 days after the confrontation at Luxury Motors, William and Marcus Johnson returned to the dealership. This time, they arrived together in William's Rolls-Royce, though the reception was markedly different. Instead of the fawning attention William had received previously, they were greeted with respectful professionalism by James Rodriguez, now the acting manager. "Mr. Johnson, Marcus, thank you for coming," James said, shaking their hands firmly. "Mr. Harrington is waiting in the conference room with the staff." They followed James through the showroom, where business continued as usual with customers browsing the luxury vehicles. Several employees nodded respectfully as they passed, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. The conference room was set up for a presentation. Richard Harrington stood as they entered, extending his hand in greeting. "William, Marcus, I appreciate you taking the time to be here today." Richard gestured to the gathered staff, about 20 employees ranging from sales associates to administrative personnel. "Everyone, as you know, we experienced an incident earlier this week that revealed serious flaws in our approach to customer service and our company culture." Richard didn't sugarcoat what had happened. He described Marcus's treatment in detail, acknowledging the discriminatory nature of the incident and taking ultimate responsibility as the owner. "I've asked William and Marcus to join us today not as customers or even as people who were wronged by our organization, but as partners in helping us do better." William stepped forward. "Thank you, Richard. Before I say anything else, I want to make something clear: this isn't about public shaming or punishment. It's about growth." He surveyed the room of attentive faces. "I've built my career on identifying problems and creating solutions. The problem here isn't just one or two individuals making poor decisions. It's a system that encourages those decisions." He paced thoughtfully as he spoke. "In business, we talk about key performance indicators, metrics that tell us whether we're succeeding. But what if those metrics are measuring the wrong things? What if, in training your staff to identify serious buyers, you've inadvertently trained them to make judgments based on appearance, age, or race?" Several staff members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "I'm not here to lecture you about morality, though there is certainly a moral dimension to this discussion. I'm here to talk about effectiveness and missed opportunities." William gestured to Marcus. "My son represents one of those missed opportunities, and he has some thoughts to share with you." Marcus stood, looking remarkably poised for his 18 years. "When I walked into this dealership last week," he began, "I wasn't just a student working on a project. I was also gathering information that could have influenced future purchasing decisions, both personally and professionally." He pulled out his notebook and opened it to his engineering sketches. "I'm developing a more efficient cooling system for luxury vehicle engines that could potentially reduce fuel consumption by 8% without sacrificing performance. My professor believes it has commercial applications." James leaned forward with genuine interest. "That's impressive." "The point is," Marcus continued, "you never know who might walk through your doors or what opportunities they might represent. When Victoria and Derek decided I didn't belong here based on how I looked, they weren't just being unfair to me, they were potentially damaging their own business." Richard nodded grimly. "A painful but necessary lesson for all of us." William stepped forward again. "Let me be clear, we're not asking you to treat people well because they might secretly be rich or connected. We're suggesting that treating everyone with respect and dignity is both the right thing to do and good business practice." He turned to Richard. "Which is why I'm proposing a partnership between Johnson Tech and Harrington Auto Group." Richard raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What kind of partnership?" "Two parts," William explained. "First, I'd like to establish an internship program for engineering students from diverse backgrounds to work with your design and development teams. Marcus would help coordinate from the university side. And second," he continued, "Johnson Tech will move forward with our fleet purchase, through this dealership, but with a condition: a portion of the commission will fund bias training and community outreach programs." The staff exchanged glances, many looking relieved and even excited by this unexpected turn of events. Richard extended his hand to William. "That's more than generous. I accept on behalf of Harrington Auto Group." As they shook hands, Marcus noticed someone hovering at the back of the room. James had quietly invited several of the Westfield engineering students to attend the session. Professor Whitman stood among them, nodding approvingly. "One more thing," Marcus said. "I'd like to present my project findings to your engineering team when it's complete. The cooling system could be valuable to your high-performance models." Richard smiled genuinely. "We'd be honored, Marcus. Your insight clearly exceeds your years." As the meeting concluded, staff members approached Marcus individually, some apologizing for their colleagues' behavior, others asking thoughtful questions about his project. The atmosphere had transformed from tense to collaborative, from defensive to receptive. William watched his son with quiet pride. Marcus had turned a humiliating experience into an opportunity for change, not just for himself, but for others who might follow. 1 month after the confrontation at Luxury Motors, Victoria Harrington sat in a small office at the dealership, waiting nervously. The past 4 weeks had been the most difficult of her professional life. Her suspension had given her plenty of time to reflect on her actions and their consequences. The anti-bias training Richard had mandated had been enlightening, if uncomfortable, forcing her to confront assumptions she hadn't even realized she held. The door opened, and Richard entered with James Rodriguez. "Victoria," Richard nodded, taking a seat across from her. "Dad," she replied, then corrected herself. "Mr. Harrington. Thank you for meeting with me." Richard studied his daughter carefully. "James tells me you've completed all the required training." "Yes, sir." "And the community service hours at the youth engineering program?" James nodded confirmation. "She's been working with high school students from underserved communities, helping them prepare for college applications. By all accounts, she's been exemplary." Victoria's normally perfect appearance showed signs of strain, less makeup, hair pulled back simply, her designer clothes replaced by something more modest. "The change wasn't just external. I've had a lot of time to think," she said quietly. "About the kind of person I've been. The kind of manager. It's not who I want to be anymore." Richard's expression remained neutral. "This isn't just about one incident, Victoria. This is about a pattern of behavior that I allowed to develop under my leadership." "I know," she acknowledged. "And I'm not asking for my position back. Not yet. I haven't earned that." Richard raised an eyebrow, surprised by her response. "Then what are you asking for?" "A chance to prove I can change. To start over." Victoria straightened in her chair. "I'd like to work directly with the community outreach program we're developing with Johnson Tech. Not as a manager, but as a team member." Richard and James exchanged glances. "That's not what I expected," Richard admitted. "The students I've been working with, they're brilliant, Dad. Absolutely brilliant. But they don't have the opportunities one had. They don't have the connections." Victoria leaned forward earnestly. "One young woman designed an electric motor from salvaged parts that's more efficient than anything I've seen. But she's worried about even applying to engineering schools because she can't afford the application fees." James nodded approvingly. "Sounds like you found a calling." "Maybe," Victoria said. "At minimum, I've found some perspective." Richard considered his daughter thoughtfully. "The outreach program could use someone with your organizational skills. But you'd be reporting to James, not the other way around. And your performance would be evaluated regularly, with input from the Johnson Tech team." "I understand," Victoria replied without hesitation. "There's one more thing," Richard added. "Marcus Johnson will be interning with our design department this summer. You'll likely be working with him on several projects. Are you prepared for that?" Victoria took a deep breath. "I owe him an apology. A real one, not just because he's William Johnson's son, but because of how I treated him as a human being. If he's willing to work with me, I'd consider it a privilege to learn from him." Richard's stern expression finally softened. "You've changed, Victoria." "I'm trying to," she admitted. "It's not easy facing who you've been." "No," Richard agreed. "It never is." As Victoria left the office, she found Marcus speaking with several engineers near the design studio that had been set up as part of the new partnership. He looked up as she approached, his expression guarded. "Marcus," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "Do you have a moment?" He nodded, excusing himself from the group. "I wanted to apologize," Victoria began, her practiced poise giving way to genuine remorse. "Not because I have to, or because of who your father is, but because what I did was wrong. I judged you based on appearances and my own biases, and I treated you disrespectfully. There's no excuse for that." Marcus studied her, searching for sincerity. "I understand if you don't forgive me," she continued. "But I wanted you to know that I'm learning from my mistakes, and I'm committed to doing better." After a moment, Marcus extended his hand. "Everyone deserves a second chance to prove who they really are. That's what my father always says." Victoria shook his hand, surprised by the simple gesture of grace. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I won't waste the opportunity." As she walked away, Victoria realized that the humbling experience of the past month had given her something valuable, a chance to redefine herself not by status or power, but by character and contribution. 6 months later, the luxury motors showroom buzzed with activity as guests arrived for the unveiling of a new prototype. The dealership had been transformed, not just physically with a new design studio and education center, but culturally as well. William Johnson stood with Richard Harrington near the covered vehicle that sat on a rotating platform in the center of the showroom. "I never expected our businesses to align like this," Richard admitted. "But I'm grateful for how it's turned out." William nodded. "Sometimes the best partnerships arise from the most challenging circumstances." They watched as Marcus guided a group of high school students through the engineering exhibit that had been set up along one wall. Victoria assisted, answering questions and encouraging the young visitors to try the interactive displays. "She's really found her place with the outreach program," Richard observed, watching his daughter. "I've never seen her so fulfilled." "People can surprise you when given the right opportunity," William replied. "Marcus tells me she's been instrumental in securing scholarships for 3 of those students." The sound of a glass being tapped called everyone's attention to the center of the showroom. James Rodriguez stepped up to a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Luxury Motors. Today marks not just the unveiling of an innovative prototype, but the celebration of a partnership that has changed our company for the better." He gestured to the covered vehicle. "This prototype represents the collaborative work of our design team and Westfield University's engineering department, led by a remarkable young innovator." Marcus stepped forward, joining James at the center. "6 months ago, I came here as a student with an idea," Marcus began. "Today, that idea has become reality thanks to the collaboration between Johnson Tech, Harrington Auto Group, and Westfield University." He looked around the room, his gaze briefly meeting Victoria's. She gave him an encouraging nod. "This prototype incorporates the cooling system I was researching that day, now refined and improved through collaboration." Marcus gestured to the engineering students gathered nearby. "And these students represent the future of automotive innovation, diverse perspectives bringing fresh ideas to an industry ready for transformation." With a dramatic flourish, the cover was pulled away, revealing a sleek sports car with revolutionary design elements. Applause filled the showroom. As guests moved forward to examine the vehicle more closely, Marcus found himself standing next to Victoria. "Congratulations," she said sincerely. "It's brilliant work." "Thank you," he replied. "I hear you've been doing some impressive work yourself with the scholarship program." Victoria smiled modestly. "Just trying to open doors that should have been open all along." Across the room, William watched his son with pride. Marcus had taken an incident of discrimination and transformed it into an opportunity for innovation and change, not just for himself, but for an entire community. Richard joined him, following his gaze. "You know, when this all started, I was terrified of the damage to our reputation. Now I realize it was the best thing that could have happened to this company." "Sometimes we need to be shaken out of our comfort zones to see what's possible," William observed. As the event continued, the showroom that had once been the site of humiliation and discrimination had become a place of collaboration and opportunity, proof that with the right approach, even the most painful moments could become catalysts for positive change. The prototype stood as a symbol of what was possible when talent was recognized regardless of appearance, when bridges were built instead of barriers, and when second chances were given to those willing to learn and grow. It was, in every sense, a new beginning. Dear Fiend, in a world where we're often judged by appearances rather than character, this story reminds us that dignity and respect should never be reserved only for those who look the part. Every day, countless individuals face discrimination based on how they look or where they come from, experiences that leave lasting scars. But through education, accountability, and giving second chances, we can build a more inclusive society that recognizes the potential in everyone. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to support more content that sparks important conversations about bias, privilege, and the power of transformation. Together, we can make a difference, one story at a time.